Ever wanted to draft for the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC, the Indigo Disk, but don't know where to start? Well, this is a series for you. What is going on, everybody? You have Tone here, and we are back again with another episode of the How to Draft a Scarlet and Violet series, episode number 10. So, it has been a while since I've done this series, and at the time, it is currently January 11th, at the time of me recording this video. So, Happy New Year. Happy 2025 to everybody. So I'm recording this well in advance because I do have, I believe at the time of me uploading this video, I'm pretty sure the next draft league I'll be taking part in will have already started by then. In regards to the series on the How to Draft series, I always figured at the start of the year, once that draft league started, I was going to pick up this series once again, get the ball rolling. So with that out of the way, I'm just going to jump right into it. There's not really much to talk about because it's been such a while between the last episode I uploaded and the current one. So if there's anything you guys watching want me to go further in depth with, whether it be drafting, whether it be building, or anything draft league related, feel free to leave a comment in the description down below, and any other suggestions for any Pokemon you'd like to see me try to draft or go more in depth on in terms of building, drafting, etc. I would like to hear you guys' opinion and any other thoughts you might have on the series as a whole. If you guys missed the other series, the other few episodes, there will be a playlist in the top right hand corner of the screen, so you can feel free to click that and check out the other episodes that have happened already so far on the channel. So with that out of the way, let's jump right into the team for episode number 10. So this was a long awaited request by someone. I forgot who it was, but I knew right away that I had to try my best to build the best team possible given this core, the core I came up with myself. And keep in mind, guys, that the teams that I do put together in this sort of vicinity, it's not something that you should be taking like by the book. This is just more so a template and just to give you an idea of at least my perspective on how to go about drafting with certain Pokemon in mind. So with that being said, I'm going to be drafting with this core consisting of, for episode number 10, we have Raging Bolt for the first time on this series. So I've done Gouging Fire a while back, and I knew at some point someone had asked me to do Raging Bolt, and it was really not really difficult, but it was basically just a sense of utilizing Pokemon that I have not used so far on the series and making them shine more, as opposed to just reusing the same other Pokemon over and over again, just so you have a bit of variety with the teams. So with how Raging Bolt works, it is a nuke. It is a hard-hitting Pokemon backed by Electric Dragon typing, which is solid on its own, but even better when it has the ability to Terastallize. But the main issue still comes with the fact that even when you do have the option to Terra with Raging Bolt, there are still going to be issues when it comes to dealing with certain Pokemon, particularly ground types. While it can have the ability to deal with ground types via Terra, that won't often be the case when it comes to certain matchups, so you want to have other Pokemon utilizing the ability to deal with ground types for Raging Bolt as a failsafe, just so it can spam its electric type moves a lot more freely. One way of mitigating that is to have a strong way of dealing with said ground types, whether it be a water type Pokemon like Palafin, or having a grass type Pokemon. The grass type I'm using here is Ogerpon, and the main reasoning for that is Ogerpon could essentially have been any other form, but in terms of consistency and for the positioning of where I have the draft, Ogerpon Teal Mask felt a little bit more flexible as opposed to using something like Ogerpon Wellspring, which is what I was really trying to get into the notion here. But Ogerpon Wellspring didn't really feel like a Pokemon that would fit in the mindset of, would I be able to get Raging Bolt round 1 and still get Ogerpon Wellspring round 2? The odds of that happening are still likely, but I wanted to be a bit more realistic towards the cause, so I used Ogerpon Teal Mask just for not only trying to save a little bit of point, because the tiering I'm using is for the previous draft league I was in, the BBRD league, and Ogerpon Teal Mask was cheaper than Ogerpon Wellspring. So For point preferences and to keep the bit of flexibility with the team, I went with Teal Mask over Wellspring. Ideally, you don't have to follow this exact core per se. Your grass type can be essentially any hard-hitting physical attacker for the most part, so something like a Rillaboom. Rillaboom helps out immensely with Raging Bolt being able to set grassy terrain to weaken the ground attack taken at Raging Bolt. And another option, of course, Meowscarada, having the incredible speed tier, keeping the grass typing, checking those ground type Pokemon, and then giving you stuff like knockoff, U-turn, and the like. Ogerpon essentially does pretty much what Meowscarada can do. It's slower but slightly bulkier. And of course, with the ability in Defiant, you have a means of deterring Defog at any sense. And even better, you have a means of getting momentum against stuff like Corviknight, Skarmory, any other offensive flying type Pokemon that can pressure Ogerpon have to deal with Raging Bolt in a sort of like fast Volt turn core. And then decided to pair both of those up with perhaps one of the best Glumons for draft in general in Ting-Lu. The amount of hits this thing can take is absolutely ridiculous, and the consistency of it being able to set up hazards for any draft is bar none. Its bulk is impeccable, its typing is fantastic, it has a great ability in Vessel of Ruin to weaken those special attackers, Whirlwind for phasing. Just a fantastic concept and really benefits for the rest of this team overall, having the ability to have that Spiker, Stealth Rocker, and an immediate hazard pressure right away. It's also the reason why I went Ogerpon over Rillaboom, since Rillaboom's grassy terrain would weaken Ting-Lu's Earthquake, which is really a hindrance in and of itself. So, with that out of the way, let's jump right into the rules and roles for a quick refresher of sorts. So, first off, there's a slight change, but there's nothing really different about these rules and roles to follow. Also, keep in mind, guys, this as well you can take as a template. I am not expecting you guys to follow everything you see here on this list. This is more so just a basic idea for newer Draft League players to just come in and have an idea of what to look out for when it comes to picking a mon to build around, picking a team, and going from there. So, I say Terra won't play a factor in making the team. I'm using the BBRD League draft board to make this team, and with that being said, I'm already under the premise that our Terra captain is going to be Raging Bolt. So, while Terra won't play a factor, we're under the assumption that Raging Bolt will be our lone Terra captain, because that's how the BBRD League rules work. You pick one Pokemon, it has access to every single Terra type in the game. So there won't be any extra like pick 3 Terra types and whatnot. None of that. You have free reign. Raging Bolt's a Terra captain. No questions asked. The order of the Pokemon doesn't mean to draft them in that round. There will be variations where people will value other Pokemon earlier or later or not at all and have different opinions. You gotta respect that. Alternate options will of course be included at the end. You don't have to draft the exact same mons I am showing you on the screen. These are just nothing more than a template that just fits how I built the team as a whole. The balance core, we already have essentially some sort of nucleus in play, but we will build on it as we go, as well as the defensive core will also come during the later rounds. 2 strong priority options, at least 2. Some people will disregard having 2 or even 1, and some disregard priority altogether. Basically just how people will draft these days, or just they'll disregard that option, but having at least one form of priority is always nice. And with Raging Bolt already on the team as it is, that's already been covered pretty nicely. So ideally you want 2. Of course it's an optional whether you get 2 or 1. It really just depends on your preference and how the team looks to you and how it feels in your hands. At least 2 Stealth Rockers. The last thing you want to do is go into a team building perception and only be stuck having one Pokemon be the rocker. While we already have that in Ting-Lu, we want to free up Ting-Lu to do a little bit more and be a slightly bit more flexible option for our building purposes. So ideally we will draft another Stealth Rocker to go up along with Ting-Lu. Spikes and Toxic Spikes. The Toxic Spikes one's a bit more optional here, but since we already have Spikes on not only Ting-Lu but on Ogerpon as an option for a more offensive hazard setting mon, the option is there. We already have that covered, so that's really nice. Then we have at least one hazard removal. Removal in this generation is a little bit wonky, especially with the prevalence of heavy duty boots. So it is sort of like the metagame is so offensive to the point where the last thing you're really thinking about is removal as a necessity. People will still draft it, but when it comes to like depending on the Pokemon, people will draft the spinner because not only is it valuable, but because of the added effect of getting a speed boost. So take that as you will, but normally, since the metagame is so offensive, you can just be a bit more aggro with this team and try to be a bit more aggressive, hazard attack your opponent, and then try to win the game from there by getting yourself in the best position with your breakers and win conditions. We want at least 2 Pokemon at or above base 110. I did add in the at or part just to include those Pokemon at 110 speed. Ogerpon itself is base 110, so that in and of itself is nice, but ideally you want at least another Pokemon faster than base 110 speed. You don't want Pokemon like Meowscarada and Weavile running Adamant. You don't want stuff like Darkrai running Modest in nature against your team when it comes to team building. You want to avoid that at any means necessary. At least one wall breaker. Raging Bolt in and of itself is an exceptional wall breaker as it is. It just struggles dealing with special walls and ground type Pokemon. While we do have Terra, ideally you still want to have the additional means of breaking down your opponent's defensive mons. And while Raging Bolt can do that to a degree, it's not a guaranteed full save option at the most because, like I said, when we see a Raging Bolt in team prep, you pretty much know what its main attacks are going to be going for. So it's a bit easier to prep for in terms of coverage and whatnot, but it's not really multifaceted in terms of offensive potential. It's hard hitting special attacker. You're not thinking about it as a physical attacker. Straight into the point. You want at least one ground immunity. The last thing you want is your entire team to be weak to Earthquake. And while we do have a ground resist in Ogerpon, having the immunity is still much more beneficial in the long run for your team, just so you're not completely weak to stuff like Earthquake and Headlong Rush. One electric immunity, we have that in Ting-Lu. The one thing also is to dissuade your opponent from getting free momentum. U-turn is like the most spammable momentum move in the game as it is. Volt Switch is also spammable if your opponent, if you don't have a ground type or an electric immunity. So while U-turn is like more spammable than Volt Switch, you still have to account for both of them if at all possible. Even stuff like Flip Turn is a bit more of a nuisance as well. But at least with electric immunity, you want to disavoid Volt Switch because Volt Switch from a strong pivot or a hard-hitting electric type Pokemon can be a bit detrimental to your team, and the last thing you want to be doing is giving your opponent momentum for free against your team. A bulky water. Water is one of the best defensive typings in the game as it is, right up there with Fairy, and just having that typing just to be able to resist stuff like ice attacks, water in itself, fire, like it's just really nice for any team to have. And bulky waters do come and go in different varieties, but having at least the option of having a fail-safe bulky mon to just switch in and take hits regardless of the situation just benefits your team in the long run and makes things easier for the rest of your team. One grounded poison type, just because you don't want your entire team to be immediately weak to toxic spikes. Toxic spikes may not come up that often, but just having the ability to dissuade your opponent from going like, oh, there's no grounded poison, I can lead off with something, get up toxic spikes immediately, like a Glomora, for example. Use toxic debris to get up T-spikes, and you have no way of getting rid of it unless you're heavy duty boots on everything. And if you're running boots, you're dissuading yourself from running any other immediate offensive options that could help you out in the long run. So having that grounded poison is very crucial to ensure that T-spikes won't be an issue for your team going forward. At least one knockoff user, which has already been accommodated with Ogerpon. You can still have other options for knockoff support since item removal is so crucial, especially with a Pokemon like Ting-Lu setting up all those hazards. Getting the ability to remove boots from Pokemon and making sure your hazard chip goes through is very important in the long run to facilitate your win conditions. At least one fast taunt one fast taunt or encore user, this also goes into the sense of speed, and this essentially just dissuades slower Pokemon from recovering, from going for hazards, setting up, and the like. You want the ability to you want the ability to dissuade your opponent while progressing your own state in the battle, and having something like Taunt and Encore just benefits you in the long run for those situations. And then the last one, the Fire, Water, Grass, and Dragon Steel Fairy Core. This is technically an optional thing to do. I have seen teams that can still function really well without the need of having to facilitate this specific core, especially with the generation of terrestrialization, where you can just Terra into any type that you're lacking and be completely fine with it. So while I do state the Fire, Water, Grass, Dragon Steel Fairy Core, do keep in mind though, this is just a basic sort of template to go off of, just because the typing combination is really nice. But again, if you're utilizing your Terra Captain to accompany or accommodate for the types that you're lacking or you're missing, then that's totally fine in and of itself. The last part is completely optional, just a basis to go into account on what to, at the very least, look out for when it comes to drafting. So with that all out of the way and accounted for, let's jump into the team for this episode. So we have our three Mons here: Raging Bolt, Ogerpon, Ting-Lu. We are going to assume that all three Pokemon are going to be drafted to us, no snipes whatsoever. We have already assumed that the Raging Bolt will be the Terra Captain of choice, Ogerpon round 2, and Ting-Lu is at round 3. Also keep in mind, as I mentioned before, Ogerpon could literally be any other strong Pokemon that can deal with ground type Pokemon. So it doesn't have to be a grass type, it could be a water type, it could be like a Palafin, it could be like a like a Quaquaval or something like that. And I said Meowscarada as well for grass type. It could be Rillaboom, but like I said, Rillaboom does do a little bit poorly in conjunction with Ting-Lu. Granted, they both benefit from the grassy terrain since they both lack recovery. So with that out of the way, let's get into the rest of the draft for this team. So moving into round number 4, our round 4 selection is actually going to be something very crucial for the Hazard Stacking core to function really well. And that's why we're pairing up Ting-Lu with Pecharunt. Absolutely love using Pecharunt from laddering with Pecharunt. The thing is so ridiculously bulky on the physical side, and Pecharunt Ting-Lu is just really nice. So you have your ghost type, so you have a spin blocker, you have a poison type, so you have your grounded poison, so toxic spikes aren't a problem. Even more so, it can nasty plot, it has reliable recovery. Poison Puppeteer is also really good in conjunction with Malignant Chain to not only poison your opponent, put them on a timer, but also have the ability to confuse your opponent when they get poisoned. On top of that, Pecharunt also does get access to Parting Shot, which allows things to be easier to weaken your opponent, to allow like a Calm Mind Raging Bolt to set up a bit easier, or even a Sword Stance Ogerpon if you build your team that way. So Pecharunt goes fantastically with Ting-Lu, just to have the immediate spin blocker, the grounded poison, immediate recovery, and the typing is just really nice in general for the draft. So that's the reasoning we got Pecharunt here for round number 4. Moving on to round number 5, we are going to pick up Azumarill with our round 5 selection, and this is the sense of where we're getting the bulky water. We're also picking up our fairy type with Azumarill, and there are some preferences whether you could go Azumarill or something like Primarina as the fairy of choice. The reasoning I went with Azumarill over Primarina, while Primarina does give you another immediate wall breaker, the thing is, while you can overlap with special attackers with Primarina plus Raging Bolt, the ability to have Azumarill is just a little bit better, if only due to the fact that it's a hard-hitting physical attacker that not only benefits from Azumarill benefits from Raging Bolt dealing with opposing water-type Pokemon. There are some exceptions, like Gastrodon to an extent, but Ogerpon can cover for those water types as well, and having both Raging Bolt and Ogerpon in conjunction with Azumarill can make things a lot easier for the team as a whole. On top of that, Azumarill also provides the team with priority with Aqua Jet, another potential win condition with Belly Drum, and is overall a very bulky mon, so it can run stuff like Assault Vest, has access to Knockoff, and Water Fairy Dual Stab is very strong in the metagame, and it's actually one of the more underrated Pokemon in this generation. It's slightly overlooked, so it feels like a solid round 5 pick, but it's still solid nonetheless, just for the reasons I mentioned before. So round 6, we're going to pick up Talonflame. Talonflame is basically here as our immediate speed, because we desperately don't have it. 126 speed is very fast in the metagame, and on top of that, it gives the team a sort of removal option, since we don't have removal at this point. It does get access to defog. Ideally, you don't want to be defogging away your hazards, mainly your Stealth Rock and your spikes. But with correct positioning, it will come to a situation where you can be a bit more aggro with your Ting-Lu and position yourself well to the point where you can stop your opponent from getting up any hazards, since Talonflame does get access to Taunt, so you can stop any potential hazard setters from doing their thing or any other Pokemon from setting up. Even more so, being a fire type Pokemon gives you a means of dealing with grass types. For Raging Bolt, which resists. For the grass types, dealing with Raging Bolt helps out Ogerpon, helps out Talonflame, and it makes ease up the reliance on Petron to deal with those grass types for you. You have an immediate fast threat with Talonflame. It may not be the strongest Pokemon, but it's a pretty much good, reliable mon overall, especially considering the speed tier and the traits it provides for the team overall, also providing the team with a needed ground immunity. But it's not going to be the only ground immunity we're going to have on this draft, as round 7 we're going to pick up Bronzong. Bronzong, we did not have a steel type Pokemon, and having a means of having another ground immunity is beneficial for the team as a whole, just to ease up the pressure on Ogerpon and Talonflame trying to switch it on ground type attacks. Bronzong also provides the team with another Stealth Rocker, eases the pressure off of Ting-Lu. And with the tandem we have with the combination of Ting-Lu plus Petulant plus Bronzong, the only thing that can really hinder those Pokemon as a whole is just basically overall hard-hitting attackers, just hard-hitting wall breakers that can break through both Ting-Lu and Petulant. And the main one that comes to mind to a lesser degree would be like a Hoopa Unbound, because Hoopa Unbound, its dual stab is actually really annoying, and then Ting-Lu, while it may be resistant to both Hoopa's dual stab, it doesn't resist Drain Punch or any strong fighting attacks. So Hoopa Unbound can be a really big issue for the core in and of itself. But the other thing is, we do have ways of offensively checking it with Ogerpon and Talonflame. And for the most part, Azumarill can live a hit from Hoopa if need be. Granted, if it's not a Terracath in itself, but that's just one example I like to give. But Bronzong is here essentially providing the team with the traits of having the Steel type that was needed, the ground immunity with Levitate, another Stealth Rocker, and the typing overall is just solid for the team as a whole. Now we're going to get to a bit more wall breaking potential for the team, and that's what we have for round 8 in drafting Lucario. So Lucario may seem like a weird choice here, especially we just drafted a Steel type Pokemon, why get another one? Well, in my estimation and my personal opinion, Lucario was never a Steel type. It's a Steel type in typing only. The main thing Lucario does benefit from is having an immediate backbone defensively already on the draft. You have Ting-Lu, you have Petulant, Azumarill, but mainly Bronzong. Having Bronzong here allows the team to get Lucario to have another potential wall breaker on the draft, whether it be Sword Dance with extreme speed, whether it be Nasty Plot with Vacuum Wave. Having the ability to be sort of a offensive demon and an offensive nuke is just really beneficial for the draft, because we have already established our defensive core. This allows us to go into the back and get some more offensive wall breaking potential to go along with Raging Bolt, especially considering that the potential hazard stack we have can make Lucario shine even more. Even more so, as I already mentioned, there's extreme speed and vacuum wave to consider for priority options. So if the means doesn't come up to the point where you don't get the ability to pick something off with your speed, you have triple priority on this team in conjunction with hazard stack, and you even have a trick move mode to go into with Bronzong if you decide to go that route. But I really love Lucario here just because, like I mentioned, having the ability to have both the potential to be a Sword Stance Nasty Plot breaker that benefits from Raging Bolt breaking down other things, and Lucario in and of itself can already break down ground type Pokemon, and base 90 speed allows it to be a pretty decent means of offensively checking other offensive threats. Because another thing that does benefit Raging Bolt too is having something between 80, like about 85 and that 90 speed range. We have Petron at 88, but Petron isn't a Pokemon that's going to be running a max speed set that often. Normally you'll be running like about more defensively, whether it be Fizz Def, Spadef. Like max HP, max speed could be a thing too for Petron too, but it's not really going to have an offensive potential, any offensive firepower behind it, because it's still technically a bit weak. Lucario doesn't have the defenses to really stand out, but like I said, the defensive core we already have in motion with Ting-Lu, Petron, Eviazu, Bronzong allows Lucario to be freed up a bit more, and especially considering that we have the Volturn potential with Ogerpon, with Raging Bolt, and with Talonflame, can get Lucario in a bit more freely, set up, and potentially do some late game cleaning on itself, and it makes a good win con in the long run. So, we only have 7 points left, and we're only going to get 2 more Pokemon with this draft. And this is going to be a little bit of a weird pick by some standards, but gotta trust me for this one. So round number 9, we're going to pick up Sableye for our round 9 selection, and it may be iffy that you're wondering, why get a Sableye here? Sableye doesn't really fit what this team needs, because there's already a Ghost type in Petron, you already have a Dark type in Ting-Lu. What does Sableye provide me? And the main thing to take into account with Sableye is, don't judge a book by its cover. The one thing though to take into account with Sableye is, this is all based on having support mons in the back and getting the most with what you have left. With Sableye though, it has one of the best abilities in Prankster. Prankster allowing you to get priority on your status moves, so you have the ability to cripple your opponent with either Will-O-Wisp or Thunder Wave. The team in and of itself is fairly slow as it is, and it's reliant mostly on revenge killing with Thunderclap, Raging Bolt, Aqua Jet, Azumarill, priority move with Lucario. So having Sableye provide you with that potential speed control with Thunder Wave is also very beneficial. On top of that, being a Prankster Pokemon, it does get access to Reflect and Light Screen, making it easier for a Calm Mind Raging Bolt, an SD Ogerpon, a Belly Drum Azu, SD Nasty Plot Lucario, or even an SD Talonflame. You have that option. And the last thing to take into account here that could benefit Raging Bolt, Sableye does get Sunny Day. I'm just saying, if you want to get the activation on Pro Sense without having to use your booster energy, by all means, you can Sunny Day. The only downside is Sableye doesn't really have a means of pivoting out unless you're running a jetpack with Sunny Day. Other than that though, Sableye is just a very good support Pokemon, and you also have to be careful with the opponent trying to set up in front of Sableye, because Sableye also gets access to Encore. So, you have Encore with Prankster priority, you have Taunt on Talonflame, a means of being a real disruptor for the team. Something that Petron can't really do. However, I also forgot to mention Petron does get Parting Shot. So, you have your means, you have your modes of momentum going for you there, and Nasty Plot Petron can also benefit from the dual screens from Sableye. So, while Sableye may look weird being with double Ghost, double Dark, the niche and the reasoning is pretty straightforward. And then lastly, for round number 10, we're going to pick up Kamala for 3 points. It's just a means of having a Ghost immunity for the team that's not overly reliant on Ting-Lu. While Kamala may not come up that much in games, it does give you removal that's not default Talonflame, and as a small niche, it also does give access to Wish support to help out Ting-Lu and any other Pokemon on the team that's lacking in the recovery department. It also does get access to Knockoff as a means of another disruptor and U-turn for momentum purposes. So, with that out of the way, that is a team for this episode. Now to jump into the alternatives for this team. So, starting with round number 4, as opposed to Petron, you want to be more offensive, there's Gengar. Granted, Gengar For the most part, Gengar is not really going to be like a round 4 Pokemon. I do still like Gengar, although it's really fallen off over the generations for me. I still do like it. It's just not a Pokemon that you're going to think of being bulky. If you prefer a more offensive mon to fill this role, Gengar would definitely still fit the role, but you do miss out on having the added bulk and the potential recovery and momentum, so do keep that in mind. Round number 5, as opposed to Azumarill, like I mentioned, there is Primarina. I want the physical route here, but if you want to stack up on special attackers with Primarina plus Raging Bolt, you by all means can do that. There is no stopping. There is no reason why you cannot do that in this situation. The other thing that does benefit you with Primarina is Primarina gives you additional momentum with Flip Turn. So if you want a more offensively, a more momentum reliant water type Pokemon, then you can indeed go after Primarina while still having that fairy typing for your draft. Round number 6, instead of Talonflame, there's Noivern, there's Kilowattrel. The only downside is only Noivern. I don't think even Noivern gets defog. I'm pretty sure it does still. Kilowattrel does not. The team doesn't have an electro type Pokemon, so it can be a bit annoying at times, but Noivern and Kilowattrel still fits the mold of having a fast Pokemon that can benefit from outspeeding certain Pokemon and being a good threat, offensive threat with their dual stab. Talonflame was just a bit more beneficial here just because it's a defogger that can pressure grass type Pokemon not only for Ogerpon but for Azumarill as well, and it fits the team a lot better. But by all means, Noivern and Kilowattrel can still fit the mold just fine. But ideally, something faster than 110 speed would be your go-to here. Otherwise, you would get something like a Moltres to potentially fulfill sort of the same role as Talonflame, but the lack of removal is a bit iffy. And ideally, you'd want to get that speed right away, so that's why I prioritize Talonflame on this draft. Then, round 7, as opposed to Bronzong, there's Earthworm. It doesn't have to be a ground immunity per se, but Earthworm does provide the team with a ground immunity thanks to Earth Eater. So if you want to save a little bit more points, you can definitely go with Earthworm as your steal of choice, but do keep in mind though that Earthworm does not have the best of special defenses, but that is covered by the fact that Ting-Lu is on the draft. So you can do with that as you will. Then for round number 8, Lucario. Technically, Lucario can be any additional wall breaker for the team would definitely fit in this slot. Some other examples I can give for the Lucario slot, I specifically went for a fighting type Pokemon just because the team didn't have that either. But another option you can go for something like a Mienshao. Mienshao gives you a little bit of a faster Pokemon 105 speed. It keeps the priority with Fake Out. It gives you another knockoff user. Reckless high jump kicks, close combat, U-turn for momentum, and Regenerator is also a very solid ability for Mienshao. But if you want a more hard-hitting, if you want something that's still hard-hitting, can break easily, and can dissuade even status for your team, a more low-key option could be something like a Heracross. Another forgotten Pokemon, unless you're playing low tier, but Heracross can also fit the mold here as just a hard-hitting physical attacker. Guts with Flame Orb can nuke a lot of Pokemon, and having a status deterrent for your physical attackers is also very, very nice to take into account for this draft in particular, because there are Pokemon on this draft that definitely do not like getting burnt. Then for round 9, as opposed to Sableye, the Sableye thing was essentially just having a good support mon in this slot to benefit the rest of the team. So ideally you would want to get Sableye just for the reason I mentioned before, but if you don't get Sableye, some other prankster mons could work here, like a Volbeat or Illumise. Just because they both provide Sunny Day support, they both provide Thunder Wave support, so you still have that speed control choice in the back. Other prankster mons like like Meowstic is also a thing, could potentially work too. Just because Meowstic does get access to Thunder Wave as well as the dual screens, as well as Sunny Day. So you have your choice there in terms of support options. It just comes down to which one more fits your fancy. And then lastly, as opposed to Kamala, if you wanna, there's Ambipom for 1 extra point. Cinccino and Mousehold are also a thing, are also choices as well. If you want to disregard the whole rapid spin in the back thing, or just removal, there's also Zangoose as a means of a hard-hitting physical breaker, and a normal type in general. It also gives you quick attack for priority purposes. So, with that out of the way, that is going to be it for episode number 10 in the How to Draft series. I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you do enjoy it, feel free to leave a like, comment, click the subscribe button. Yeah, this was definitely a episode for 2025. I do hope you guys appreciate the work I had to go through to put this thing together. I did not forget about the series. I'm glad to get it back up off the ground, and all things considered, I feel like this is a good way to get back to doing this series and addressing and educating the draft league masses of the new and maybe the intermediate. But with that out of the way, thank you guys again so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video nonetheless. Feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. I already talked about that, but we'll leave it at that, guys. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and until the next time, guys, this is Tone signing out for now. Peace out.